The Desert Stop gas station shimmered under the late afternoon sun, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt breathe. Inside, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft ding of the counter bell were the only sounds. Then the door creaked open and a man stepped in. Black jeans, leather vest, faded tattoos crawling up both arms. Brody Kincaid, full patch member of the Hells Angels. Before we start this story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. Also, please consider subscribing to our channel. It'll help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. And before you scroll away, type these 4 words in the comments: "Real angels still ride." The clerk froze for half a second, the way people do when their brain tells them one story and their heart tells another. Brody wasn't there for trouble. He was there for coffee, black and cheap, and to stretch his legs after a 200-mile ride. Outside, next to Pump 2, a beat-up minivan idled. Inside sat a man with tired eyes. Tanner Reed, single father, early 30s, face sunburned, beard a few days past a shave. His daughter, maybe 6 years old, slept in the back seat under a faded unicorn blanket. He'd been sitting there for 10 minutes, staring at a wrinkled piece of paper, folding and unfolding it like a nervous prayer. He didn't know who to give it to, or if anyone would care. But desperation doesn't care about pride. He saw the biker walk out of the store, coffee in hand, helmet hanging from his fingers. Something inside Tanner clicked. Fear, instinct, or maybe just the kind of trust born from the fact that he had no one else left to trust. He stepped out of the van, the hot air hitting his face like a slap. "Hey," he called softly. The biker turned, cautious, eyes hidden behind aviator lenses. "Yeah?" Tanner swallowed. "You ride with the Angels, right?" Brody studied him for a beat, then nodded once. "That's right." Tanner hesitated, his hand shaking slightly as he pulled the crumpled note from his pocket and held it out. "Then maybe you're the only one who can help. Before we start this story, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, because this one's not about outlaws. It's about what happens when angels trade their wings for wheels and stand between innocence and evil. Brody didn't take the note right away. He'd seen this look before, that quiet panic of a man cornered by life. Finally, he reached out and unfolded it. The handwriting was messy, smudged with sweat. Just a few lines. He took her, my little girl. Said I'd never see her again. They won't help me. Please, someone has to. Underneath was an address, Old Creek Motel, Route 71. Brody's eyes flicked up. "When?" "This morning," Tanner whispered, voice breaking. "Her mom's ex. She's been running from him for months. Cops said it's a civil matter. I tried, man. I really tried." He rubbed his eyes. "You don't know me. I don't even know why I'm asking. But you guys, you don't look away." Brody folded the note carefully, slid it into his vest pocket, right over the patch that read, "Honor, loyalty, family." He finished his coffee, tossed the cup in the trash, and started his bike. "Stay here," he said. "Don't go anywhere." Tanner blinked. "You believe me?" Brody put on his helmet, the engine growling to life like a promise. "Don't have to. I just know when someone's out of options." He throttled once, the sound splitting the silence, and rode off into the desert sun. 30 miles away, the Hells Angels Mesa. Chapter Clubhouse sat behind a chain-link fence and a row of dust-covered trucks. It wasn't what outsiders imagined. No chaos, no drunken chaos. Just men with grease on their hands, laughter in the air, and loyalty like blood. Brody rolled in, engine rumbling to a stop as a dozen heads turned. At the bar counter inside, Tessa Rogue Marin, the club's road captain and one of the few women patched in, looked up from her paperwork. "You're back early. she said. Brody dropped the folded note on the table. Kidnapping. Single dad. Little girl, maybe 6. That got everyone's attention. You call the cops? Someone asked. Yeah, Brody said flatly. They called it custody confusion. Rogue read the note, her eyes hardening. Old Creek Motel. That's Snake's territory. Not anymore, Brody said. It's ours today. By sunset, 5 bikes rolled out of Mesa, Brody in front, followed by Rogue, Tiny, Blaze, and Doc. Their headlights cut through the dust, engines thundering across the desert. This wasn't about violence. It was about presence. The kind of presence that made bad men second-guess their choices. At a diner 2 miles from the motel, they stopped. Brody spread a map across the hood of his Harley. Room 12, he said. That's where she's supposed to be. Neighbor heard a man yelling this morning. Doc nodded. We go quiet. See first. Act later. Tiny cracked his knuckles. If he touches that kid again, seeing's all I need. Rogue gave him a look. We do this smart. Cameras on. No fists unless fists come first. We're not just saving a girl. We're proving who we really are. Brody looked at each of them one by one. We move in 10. The Old Creek Motel looked like time had given up on it. Faded paint, broken neon. The kind of place you pay cash and pray no one remembers your face. The Angels parked in the back lot, lights off, shadows stretching long in the last orange light. Brody could hear the faint sound of shouting, muffled, female. He motioned to the others. Tiny flanked the far side. Rogue covered the office. Blaze kept the bikes hot. Brody approached room 12, boots silent on the cracked pavement. The door was half closed. Inside, a man's voice slurred, angry. Brody's jaw tightened. He pushed the door open slowly. What he saw froze him for a second. A man in a white shirt, drunk, wild-eyed, was gripping a little girl's wrist. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just quiet. Like fear had worn her out. Brody stepped in. Let her go. The man turned, smirked. Who the hell are you? Brody took a slow step forward. The last man you'll ever point that tone at. The others moved in behind him, silent and steady. The man blinked. Then his smirk vanished as he saw the patches. The drunk man's smirk faltered as his eyes darted from patch to patch, red and white. Wings and skulls, symbols he'd only ever seen on the news. But this wasn't a headline. This was real. Brody stepped closer, his voice calm, but carrying that unmistakable weight of someone who meant every word. Let her go. The man's hand loosened, but not enough. He was still drunk on arrogance, on power. You can't just barge in here, he spat. She's my kid. You got no right. Brody's expression didn't change. You lost that right the second she looked afraid of you. Behind him, Rogue pulled out her phone, already recording. Doc, quiet as always, knelt near the girl, keeping his hands visible and his voice gentle. Hey, sweetheart. You hurt? She shook her head slowly, wide-eyed, clinging to a small stuffed animal missing one eye. The man tried to take a step forward, puffing up his chest. You don't scare me. Brody smiled, not the friendly kind. The kind that says you should be scared, but not because of me. Because of what you've become. Then maybe, Brody said quietly, it's time someone reminded you what fear really feels like. Outside, the sound of engines idled low. 5 Harleys like thunder waiting for a storm. The motel manager peeked through the blinds, eyes wide, phone in hand. Rogue caught his gaze and said, You might want to call the police. Tell them there's a domestic dispute. Make sure they send the right kind of backup. Inside room 12, the situation was seconds from boiling over. Brody moved between the man and the child. You want to yell at someone? Yell at me! The drunk man's voice cracked with the kind of rage that hides weakness. She's mine. You think you can just take... He lunged. Brody didn't move fast. He didn't have to. One hand caught the man's wrist mid-swing. twisting it gently but firmly until the man froze in pain. "You swing at me," Brody said quietly, "and I walk away fine. You swing at her again, and the next person you see will be a judge." Rogue moved past them, wrapping her jacket around the little girl's shoulders. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she whispered. "Well, Emma," Rogue said softly, "you're safe now. You hear me? No one's going to hurt you anymore." The girl looked up, eyes full of something Brody hadn't seen in a long time. The beginning of trust. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights washed over the cracked walls of the motel. Officers stepped out, cautious, hands near their belts but not drawn. The motel manager ran out babbling, "It's the bikers! They're helping!" The guy in 12, he's crazy. Officer Delgado, the lead cop, had seen Brody before. "Brody," he said, sighing. "This your mess?" Brody crossed his arms. "More like we cleaned one up." The drunk man was sitting on the curb now, wrists zip-tied by Tiny, who looked more like a wall than a human being. The little girl sat in Doc's arms, sipping water, eyes heavy from exhaustion. Delgado crouched beside Brody. "You realize this could have gone sideways?" "Yeah," Brody said. "But if we hadn't shown up, it already would have." Delgado looked at the man, bruised ego, red face, muttering threats about lawyers. Then he looked at the girl. The decision wasn't hard. "You got statements?" Rogue handed over her phone. "Video and audio, time-stamped. She's got marks on her wrist. We'll take her to the ER for documentation." Delgado nodded slowly. "You people always seem to be in the right place at the wrong time." Brody gave a faint grin. "Funny. I like to think it's the other way around." Hours later, the angels sat outside the motel under a sky full of desert stars. The girl had been taken to the hospital for evaluation. Tanner, the single dad who'd written the note, arrived in a rush, tears streaking his face when he saw his daughter safe in the ambulance. He turned to Brody, voice cracking. "I don't even know how to thank you." Brody shrugged, lighting a cigarette he wouldn't finish. "You already did." "You asked." Tanner's hands trembled. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." "Everyone just said, it's complicated." Rogue leaned against her bike. "Complicated's what people say when they're scared to do the right thing." Tanner looked at the patches, the leather, the hard faces softened by the firelight. "They say your kind only causes trouble." Brody exhaled smoke, watching it drift into the cold air. "Depends on who's telling the story." By midnight, the angels rode back toward Mesa, engines echoing like rolling thunder across the open highway. In the rear view, the motel lights faded to nothing. Brody's thoughts were quiet, heavy. The note, still folded in his vest pocket, felt heavier than any weapon. A few lines written by a desperate father had changed the course of 3 lives, maybe more. At the next stoplight, Rogue pulled up beside him. "You did good tonight." Brody didn't look at her. "We did what we're supposed to." "Yeah," she said, smiling. "But you did more than that. You reminded people what the patch really means." He nodded slowly, revved the engine, and the sound rolled into the desert like thunder with purpose. Because sometimes angels don't fall. Sometimes they ride. The next morning, the first light crept through the blinds of a small hospital room. Tanner sat beside his daughter's bed, her tiny hand wrapped around his thumb like she was afraid to let go. The machines beeped softly. Proof of life, proof that she'd survived the kind of night no child should ever know. Brody stood by the doorway, silent. He'd seen a lot in his life, men broken by war, brothers buried too young, but nothing hit harder than a parent's tears of relief. Tanner looked up, voice cracking. "They said she's gonna be okay. Just a few bruises." "A little shaken," Brody nodded. "Kids are tougher than we think." Tanner hesitated. "You really didn't have to get involved." Brody crossed his arms. "That's where you're wrong. We always have to get involved." The second you stop caring, you stop being human. Duck walked in then, holding coffee. Hospital says the cops took the guy in. Won't be walking out soon either. Assault, endangerment, unlawful restraint, he grinned. Guess the system decided to work for once. Tanner just sat there, tears quietly running down his face. I didn't even know who to call. I saw you and just thought, you looked like somebody who didn't look away. Brody's eyes softened. That's the only thing we don't do. Look away. Later that afternoon, the Mesa chapter gathered again at the Clubhouse. Same oil-stained tables, same smell of leather and gasoline. But the energy was different. Tiny leaned forward, hands clasped. That kid. She looked at me like I was some kind of superhero. He chuckled. Ain't nobody ever done that before. Rogue smiled. That's because you are, big guy. You just ride instead of fly. Laughter rippled through the room, but underneath it was something deeper. Purpose. They'd all felt it. That rush of doing something real. Brody unfolded the same crumpled note that started it all and laid it on the table. One piece of paper, he said. One dad asking for help. And because of that, a little girl's safe tonight. Makes you wonder how many other notes like this never get read. The room went quiet. Everyone knew what he meant. For every Tanner who found someone to listen, there were 10 others suffering in silence. Rogue leaned back. Then maybe we start listening better. A week later, Tanner stopped by the garage with his daughter, Emma. She wore a tiny leather jacket now, gifted by Rogue, complete with a little angel wing patch on the back. When Brody saw her, she ran straight up and hugged his leg without hesitation. Daddy says you saved me. Brody crouched down, smiling softly. Nah, I just showed up. Your dad's the one who never gave up. Tanner extended his hand. I don't have words for what you did. You don't need words, Brody said. Just promise me one thing. Raise her to know that there are good men in this world. That's enough, Tanner nodded, eyes glassy. I will. Rogue walked over and handed Emma a small silver keychain shaped like a motorcycle wheel. Whenever you see this, you remember you've got family out there on the road. Emma smiled wide. Real angels? Real ones, Rogue said, winking. Just louder. The story spread faster than any headline. Locals started talking, not about the biker gang who caused trouble, but about the bikers who stopped it. Reporters came sniffing around, but the angels didn't care for fame. They cared that people were finally seeing them right. At the diner, an old man nodded at Brody as he walked in. Heard about that girl, the man said. Good on you boys, Brody smiled faintly. Wasn't just us. A woman at the next booth chimed in. My sister went through something like that. Wish someone had shown up for her. Brody's hand tightened around his coffee cup. Then maybe that's what we do next time. Show up for someone else. That night the club gathered again. They printed business cards, plain white with bold black text. If you need help, if you're scared, if nobody believes you, call this number. You're not alone. They called it the Guardian Line. No speeches, no publicity, just a phone that would never go unanswered. A month passed. Life rolled on, engines roared, and the desert roads stretched endless again. But every now and then, Brody's phone buzzed with a message that reminded him why they did what they did. Single mom, 2 kids, scared to go home. Elderly man being threatened by his landlord. Teen girl saw your flyer. Says her brother won't stop hitting their mom. Every time the angels rode, not to start fights, to end them, not to intimidate, to protect. Tanner would sometimes stop by, bringing coffee and stories of how Emma was doing. She was in therapy, healing, drawing again. Her favorite picture, a row of motorcycles under a sunset. On the back, she'd written in shaky little letters, My angels came on bikes. Brody kept that drawing pinned to the clubhouse wall, right above the map where every new call got a red pin. Each pin a story, each story a life, and slowly, without meaning to, they'd become something bigger than a club. They'd become a movement. 3 months later, the sun set low over the Arizona hills, painting the sky in gold and rust. The Hells Angels Mesa chapter rolled down the highway in formation, 20 bikes strong, headlights stretching like a river of fire. They weren't headed to a bar or a rally. They were headed to the courthouse. Inside, Tanner Reed sat nervously in the front row. His daughter Emma clutched his arm, dressed in her favorite denim jacket, the one with the tiny angel patch Rogue had sewn on. Across the aisle sat the man who'd taken her, cuffed, defeated, his arrogance finally gone. Brody walked in quietly with Rogue and Doc, standing in the back like silent pillars of protection. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The prosecutor introduced video evidence, footage the angels had taken that night at the motel. The bruises, the recordings, the proof the system had once ignored. When the judge finally spoke, her words hit like justice itself. "Mr. Hale, you are hereby sentenced to 12 years in state custody for abduction, assault, and child endangerment." Tanner closed his eyes. His hand trembled as he reached back, gripping Brody's shoulder. "You kept your promise." Brody nodded once. "You kept your courage." And for the first time in years, Tanner walked out of a courtroom feeling safe, because this time the good guys didn't wear badges. They wore leather. Word about the Guardian line spread faster than anyone expected. It wasn't an organization or charity. It was raw humanity on wheels. Men and women who answered calls at midnight and rode into neighborhoods nobody else dared to enter. Tiny fixed a leaking roof for an elderly widow who couldn't afford repairs. Rogue started a small self-defense class for teenage girls at the local gym. Doc volunteered at a shelter, patching up bruises and handing out warm meals. Every act built on the last. Not for money, not for image, but for purpose. And one evening, as Brody stood outside the garage, looking at the growing pile of thank you letters pinned to the wall, he realized something. The same people society feared were becoming the protectors society needed. A kid on a bicycle stopped nearby, wide-eyed at the sight of all those Harleys. "Mister, are you guys the bad ones or the good ones?" Brody smiled, crouched down, and said softly, "Depends who you ask, kid. But I'll tell you a secret. We ride for the ones who can't." The boy grinned and rode off. Brody watched him go, the desert wind tugging at the old flag over the garage. One night, Tanner showed up again, but this time, not for help. He carried something wrapped in brown paper. "I wanted you to have this," he said. Brody unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a framed photograph. Emma sitting on a Harley, helmet too big, grinning from ear to ear. The picture was signed in bright purple marker, "To my biker family, thank you for finding me." Brody swallowed hard. "She's something else," Tanner smiled, eyes misty. "She's brave because she saw what real strength looks like." Rogue took the frame and hung it beside the map, right in the center, between all the red pins. It became their symbol, not of violence, of redemption, of protection. That night, when the engines roared to life again, they weren't just loud, they were proud. Each one a heartbeat of purpose echoing across the desert. Months passed. Seasons changed. But the note, that one crumpled piece of paper that started it all, stayed in Brody's vest pocket. It was worn thin now, creased and faded, but it reminded him of one truth. Help doesn't wait for heroes. It waits for anyone willing to care. One day, at a truck stop off Route 14, a young woman with a bruise under her eye quietly slipped a folded napkin into Rogue's hand while passing by. The words were familiar, desperate, honest. "Please help me." Rogue didn't ask questions. She just nodded, pulled out her phone and made the call. "Press, we got another one." Within an hour, engines echoed again, the same way they had that first night. The same way they always would, because the Guardian line wasn't just a hotline anymore. It was a promise that no cry for help would ever go unanswered again. Sunset. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, painted in gold and freedom. The Hells Angels rode together, their engines harmonizing like a single heartbeat against the horizon. Dust rose behind them, catching the last light of day, a halo on wheels. Brody led the pack, the old note still in his pocket, the little girl's laughter echoing somewhere in the back of his mind. He thought about all the names, all the faces, all the roads they'd taken to get here, somewhere out there. A stranger was watching them ride past, and maybe, just maybe, realizing that angels don't always fall from heaven. Sometimes they come roaring down the highway, chrome shining, hearts on fire, answering the call no one else hears. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that courage can wear leather and kindness can ride steel, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in good again. And before you scroll away, type these 4 words in the comments: "Real angels still ride," because the truth is simple. You don't need wings to be an angel. Sometimes you just need the guts to show up.